So this piece is originally for Baroque guitar, and we're going to be talking about a few small performance practice ideas, as well as some fingering choices for this particular piece, and we'll do a walkthrough. But if you're interested, I do have an edition of this piece, and there's a link for that in the description. So you don't have to have the capo on for this. It's just to raise the pitch level a little bit, which kind of lightens it, and also gets rid of some of the, because there's so much counterpoint in this piece, it gets rid of just a little bit of that muddy mid-range tone on the modern classical guitar, and brings us just a little bit closer to the relative pitch of the original. So either way. One thing I like about the capo though is that it kind of equalizes the sound of all the strings. So even the open strings sound fretted because everything's, fretted. You don't the sound of the open strings on the nut of the guitar does sound a little bit different. It lightens the mood, it adds a little bit of clarity and sweetness to the tone, and equalizes the tone a little bit. So I have been using the capo on the 3rd fret. For the sake of the lesson, I'll just take the capo off, because I'm assuming anyone that is used to the capo won't mind me taking it off, but those who aren't used to the capo will want me to do the lesson without it. So this piece has a lot of voice independence, so you can practice the different musical lines separately, but they do come and go a little bit. But in the first 4 measures, for example, you have a clear upper line. So you want to practice that on its own and make sure it's horizontally legato and shaped nicely. There is a little inner voice. But it does come and go a little bit, but you do want to realize that and make sure that you're also thinking of that as a through line. And then of course there's a bass. which later on in the piece does take on lots of the motifs. And so there's lots of voice exchanges here. You'll get a little idea implanted, and then you'll hear it all over. So for example, in bar 20 to 21 onward, you have that little... even there, here, so lots of little tiny motifs that get passed around to the different voices. And of course, overall, the piece is separated into variations. So you do have this intro. And after the double bar lines, you have you have the same material but in a different texture, right? So that's the first one, the theme. And then at measure 17, and then at 33, so you have that same theme there, and then at measure 49, you have the same theme as well. So it's a theme and variations in a way. And you just want to make sure that you're thinking in those terms. And a great way to do it is the way I just showed you, is play like the first 4 bars of the first section, and then play the first 4 bars of the next one, and the next one, and the next one, so that you can compare them and hear the similarities, mainly harmonically, but also melodically as well, although he varies the texture a little bit, so the exact contour of the lines aren't always exactly the same, but they're very, very similar in terms of their direction. So that's just a little bit of information about the piece itself. So I think we should just do a walkthrough now. There's not too much to talk about. Right hand fingering is pretty straightforward. Keep your thumb in the lower voice, fingers in the upper voices. Sometimes I use my thumb for the inner voice, but you can take that as it appears in the piece, and we'll talk about that. Left hand fingering, there's 1 or 2 places that I'll discuss. And there's also a couple of places where I have extended the range to the 6th string of the guitar, because the Baroque guitar is only 5 strings. So we'll talk a little bit about why I might have extended it in just a couple of places, just 1 or 2 spots. I use my thumb for the inner voice there after the first chord. In general, I would sustain everything. There's some rests there, but the rests are just to avoid a ton of ties. So in general, I would just leave your fingers down. Do a bar chord here early so that you don't have to jump the first finger over. Don't make too much of a deal of that cadence, because the main cadence occurs here. I'm doing a little trill there, 4, 3, 4, just to finish off the section, which I do in most of the sections. A good, a little bit of a push on each one of those so that the exchanges are clear between the voices. At bar 22. That closed G followed by the open G is in the original Baroque, the Baroque tablature. So I did leave it. So I think in the first half there's only one spot where I extended the range, measure 23. Obviously that motif keeps on appearing, so it makes total sense to extend that to the 6th string, for sure. You definitely want to do that. So from 33, now we have much more of a running 8th notes here. You know, it's a run-on sentence, but also don't forget that it's in the same kind of 4-bar format as the opening. So the cadence or the phrase to here. I decided to not do a bar chord here, but you could do a hinge bar. I decided to, because you can let go of the notes. Same thing here. I like to do a little mordant there. It's not in, none of the ornaments are in the original. I've added them in, but a little mordant there. So D, C sharp, D. In that previous section, you know, in measure 45, I've added a low G as well as 43 because the bass register is just, it's in that register, so adding that 6th string makes total sense instead of jumping up to the 3rd string. So I have no doubt that that's a very acceptable thing to do, is to lower that pitch there because it's all a lower bass line. Measure 49. Lots of motifs to play with here. Pretty much everywhere. So this is a section to talk about. My fingering there is for legato, so measure 55, 3. The 3 is to allow the 2 there, 3. Second finger, move the second finger down to F, so you don't have to jump any fingers. Now that line there, it's very clearly a descending bass line. It starts at 54. But that's not, of course, the original notes because they don't have a 6th string, but it's very, very logical. You can hear it. It's stepping down very logically. So I have no doubt adding those notes there. But in measure 57, the 3rd beat, that's not the bass note. Like in measure 57, the original goes B flat and G, and then moves on to the F. But because we're lowering the register there, this rewrite makes a lot of sense because the bass line is so clearly just stepping down. So inverting those 2 notes there, it just makes a ton of sense. The 2 lines, the upper line and the lower line, become a very clear musical descending line. You don't have this annoying jump in the register, which in the original is just probably only due to the fact that they only had 5 strings, so they couldn't extend that line down. So I have done that. Other editions do that too, but it's such a logical descending bass that you kind of have to do it. There's no real editing choice there. It's just something that you should probably do because it seems a little silly to play it exactly as the original when the logical line is so clear and we're not limited by 5 strings. So just carrying on from measure 59 there. Oops, second finger. trill there, D, C, D, C. And then, you know, he does have that little figure at the end again. And the only way I can really make sense is by arpeggiating the chord and just lightly throwing it in. The piece really ends right here. Throwing that in just doesn't sound quite natural to me unless I'm doing some kind of statement there. So I'm going D, A, D, A, D, A, D, just to make sense of it, or just to smooth out the idea. You could just leave it all together and just play the final chord, or you can play it exactly as written. It's totally up to you. I just found this doing a little bit of a flourish there is helpful. So I hope you enjoy that piece. It's really quite a great little piece. You know, a lot of the Baroque guitar repertoire has lots of strumming in it that doesn't sound completely natural on the modern instrument. But this particular piece is just filled with so much great counterpoint and voice exchanges and little motifs that get passed around. My advice to you is to just always continue exploring them constantly, because they just appear everywhere, like in measure 49. You know, it happens here, and then it happens in the upper voice, and then there's some stretto here. It's happening in the upper voice and the lower voice overlapping. You know, so there's tons of those motifs, sometimes overlapping each other, passed around to the different voices. So, you know, if you just keep looking at it and keep exploring the piece, you'll just keep finding little, you know, added shared motifs and little secrets that he's hidden within the piece. So it's really satisfying musically in that regard.